really quickly, before we get into the video, check out this website. It's in the UK. It's for UK reptile exotic keepers only, I'm afraid. It's completely easy and completely free to use website for buying and selling, putting yourself in touch with breeders of reptiles and exotics, but it is UK only. Anyway, on with the video. Hello you guys, it's absolutely freezing outside. In fact, it's 0 degrees, but typical UK, it's incredibly damp and cold, which is miserable for just about everything, animal and human, I think. Friends of mine have just told me they live in Canada, they've got 18 inches of snow, but they're over here and it feels colder. It is that damp. Now, things like this false water cobra, this male, I don't brumate them, but I do let them cool down quite a bit in the winter. The males usually go off their food for a while and they'll breed readily in the autumn or the spring. Why have I got a false water cobra? Because it doesn't match the thumbnail. Let me explain. This guy here, I've had him for about 13 years. I first bought a false water cobra, his mate, about 15 years ago. Now, why did I buy a false water cobra? I never heard of them until quite, shortly before then. The reason is, I'd read that they're similar to an indigo snake in their mentality. They've got a bit of presence, a bit of intelligence about them. They behave in a similar way. Strong bite force, not good at swallowing big things, but good at bludgeoning and biting everything from baby turtles, fish, snakes, mammals, birds, anything that they can get hold of, that they can get between their jaws. Similar sort of feeding response, really aggressive, hard-hitting feeders like a dry marcon. Also, high metabolism, goes with that sort of slight intelligence, I guess, and don't like it particularly hot. So all in all, a snake with a lot of the attributes of an indigo snake, which I've wanted since I was a little kid, since first seeing a little book about snakes that I got from the school library that showed, it was an Americanized book, so it had like rattlesnakes and American snakes in. And I've always wanted an indigo snake from seeing that book as a boy. And I saw some available in the UK, maybe 20 years ago now, and they were £600 each. And at the time, I thought, 600 quid for a snake? What? Never. There's my chances. I'll never be getting an indigo snake because I'm never paying that kind of money for a snake. A few years later, I'd gone self-employed. I could justify, because my self-employed business was partly revolved around snakes, I thought I can justify business-wise, I'm going to look for another indigo snake. I'm going to get one. I've wanted one all my life. £2,000 to £3,000 is all I could find. What the heck? What? Typical. Obviously, I don't do stocks and shares, so that was it. No chance at all. And then I sort of done a bit more research, and these had come into my field of vision, if you like. False water cobras, 150 quid, slightly different price. So I bought his mate, a female, and after about a year or two, I brought him to grow on and have a sort of take my hand in snake breeding. I'd only ever bred local native grass snakes until then, which were wild caught. And I thought I'd love to try and breed these. And I spoke to some great people, including, in fact, mostly the person that the female came from. And he told me everything I needed to know quite openly, which is a great keeper of any animal. Those that share knowledge freely and they want others to succeed. And I've been breeding these guys for, well over a decade now. But breeding these, and then COVID meaning I had no income and no job to go to for quite some time, it meant I really regretted not having pairs for all the snakes I'd got, because I'd got pairs of a couple of species like these and milk snakes. So I thought, I'm going to try and breed the milk snakes. Bred them first time. And I thought, there's this massive interest in snakes. I've got loads of single snakes, but if they were paired up, two things. I'd have a slight income, which would help feed and look after my animals in this dire crisis time. My wife's a nurse, she never got time off, but she had to look after basically the whole household, including me and my business. We got no government help for the business. So snake breeding more professionally began. And I've bred a lot of unusual and strange and beautiful snakes since then. And what that allowed me to do, once I was back up and running at work, was to put that snake breeding money back into my snake keeping passion. And of course it meant I could buy more expensive, more interesting, harder to get species, and I could justify it because it was snake money invested back into snake keeping. And I got offered after buying a young yellowtail crebo, a hatchling, I got offered the breeding pair. Fantastic. And that male just carried on growing. He was well over 8 foot. Most beautiful thing ever. They're the most beautiful dry mark on. If you just want stunning visuals, blue and yellow, massive presence and personality. And I bred them twice, and I invested some money, and I had black-tailed crebos, and eventually I was offered a 4 foot long eastern indigo red chin, dry mark on Cooper eye, the snake I've always wanted. I bought it for my 50th birthday present to myself. 50 years life, but maybe 44 of them really dreaming of owning an eastern indigo snake here in the UK. I'd finally plateaued and reached the top of my game. I actually had to observe, to love, to cherish an eastern indigo snake, about 4 foot long. It had some split ventral scales, which usually is said to be a sign of, poor genes, poor genetics. Britain, Europe, I think even in the States, genetic diversity is weak because they're so endangered and protected in the wild. There's very, very few original wild animals went into these gene pools. The snake was 4 foot long, looked great. Thrived, fed, one day regurgitated its food, lost weight before my eyes, and within a week or two, dropped dead. Now, I've read a lot about them. There's two things here. They demand quality care, high metabolism, a lot of waste product. Someone that's neglectful or goes on a once a week clean out regime, you could easily end up with a bacteria laden substrate. And they drink a lot, and they need good quality fresh water. Again, a once a week water change, that's not up to standard for a dry mark on. Not really, not if you want to keep them at their best. Husbandry was perfect. So husbandry nailed down, fed on rodent and chick diet, occasional bit of salmon. So whilst it could be food related, or lack of care, which it wouldn't have been, bad guts if you like, there's a lot of stuff I've read online from American keepers that due to inbreeding, there's a condition where they just have a weak heart that doesn't grow properly, and the signs are they tend to grow like weeds, as you'd expect, thrive until they're around that sort of 4 foot size. It's almost like they've outgrown their heart's capabilities, and a real sign is wasting away and dying. Who knows? One of those things. When you keep exotic animals of any kind, by far the best way to keep them healthy is to keep them healthy. Not nailing your husbandry and relying on vets, very often, by the time you take a sick exotic animal or bird to the vet, it can be beyond help, because by the time you've realised and it's shown you illness, birds especially, when they've shown illness, they've been in a long time. Oh well, gutted, 1,200 quid, bargain, waste of money. Never going to get one again. When I saw someone in the UK breeding some indigo snakes from good stock, as good as you're going to get, £2,000. And at this point, I'm not thinking of gradually working up to a pair to breed them. I just wanted my pet indigo snake. That thing I dreamt of since a small boy. I was reducing my snake collection down. I was selling things like my breeding pair of yellowtail crebos, my black-tailed crebos, breeding pair of black-headed pythons, really reducing down the collection. And I thought, okay, last ditch, let's invest that money. We'll order a male indigo snake, put ourselves on the breeders list. Sure enough, as summer came around or spring came around, he'd got me beautiful, stunning Eastern indigo snake. And I did a little video about it to say the last snake I'll ever buy, because remember, I'm reducing down. Very pleased, no split ventral scales, looked great, quality. Grew like a weed until it was 4 foot long, or thereabouts. I went on holiday, only for a week. Chris, a great reptile keeping friend of mine, said, Dave, I'll pop in and look after your animals. Very kind of him. Fed the snake, like everything else, fed well while I was away. Fed well when I came back. Opened its enclosure to clean it out. Oh, it smells in here like someone's, you know when you've left a food item in, you've missed one and it's starting to go off. Oh, I thought, oh no. But what I found was a regurgitated food item. Now the snake has a great enclosure, but it was very intricate. Found the snake, if you like, found him, got him out. Lost weight, noticeable weight loss. And you can see they're a triangular, they've got quite a triangular back, a wild dry mark on, reasonably noticeable. But when they lose all this muscle mass on the sides of their spine, it can show that they're fat, it can show they're over muscled, and it can show they've lost weight. I know. And I thought, here we go. Maybe I've just not been feeding it enough. Fed it some smaller mice. Regurgitated a couple of days later. So we got him out, put him in a hospital enclosure at home, make sure I can keep an eye on him, newspaper substrate, so on and so forth. Course of flagell. Try and treat those intestinal problems. Course of flagell, which was also making sure the snake's getting extra water on its system. Getting treated, fed it small mice, critically skinned off except for the head. And that means, as you probably know, fur is hard to digest. The head taken by the snake, but then its digestive system has a much easier job of digesting that food item. Hasn't got to break through and break down the fur to get to the easy to digest bits. Worked a treat. I was feeding it small mouse. It pooed about every 2 days, no regurg. Fed it another small mouse, pooed. So I was feeding about every 3 days. 2 small mice. Feeding well, shed perfectly, feeding well. And then it wasn't. So it hadn't put any weight on, but I was feeding it, although regularly, small items, easy to digest. So at the time, I'm just thinking, as long as you keep feeding, we keep feeding regular, the weight will come back on. Doing all right for a few weeks. Regurgitated another item. And by now it was up to full-grown mice with their fur on, and it was digesting them just fine. And then it regurgitated. Give it the benefit of the doubt, went back to a small skin mouse. It went through most of its system, still did a bit of regurgitation. Bloody hell. We'll give it one more treatment, maybe a longer treatment of flagell. Open the enclosure, clean the snake out, picked it up in one hand while I was cleaning out its newspaper, and it had a funny. It started, a bit like a king snake will do if it can smell food on you. It started turning on itself, not biting, kind of thinking about biting my hand, and then a little bit frenzied on its own body, not biting, but mouth open. This is really weird. Maybe it's just really hungry now. In that instant, lowered it in, it went round its tail a little bit, totally bent its neck round, spasmed, and had a full-on seizure. At which point, I euthanized the snake. Can't be doing with a snake suffering. it just showed it wasn't going to get any better. I don't think it was going to recover from the seizure either, but yeah, how it can turn quickly. So I've killed my second, in this case, physically, I killed my second Eastern indigo snake. Both reached a similar size, both died pretty much the same way, very, very quickly. Although this one, it had a stay of execution treatment that it got through and started feeding. So absolutely gutted. I think I've got to call it quits because I'm not breeding snakes by volume at all now. So there's no snake money to invest. I breed a couple of species like these and the blue beauties because I love breeding them and I've got people that love having them. But yeah, absolutely gutting story to tell you. Why is it always like the best things? I'm sure like you, I don't have snakes die. They just don't. If you look after most snakes half decently, they don't die. They're pretty easy to keep animals. So it is really unfortunate and really sad. So I'm going to say what I always say, as I did when I wrote an article about false water cobras in the International Herpetologist magazine, International Herpetological Society. These are the poor man's indigo snake, financially only. These false water cobras are so inexpensive. My friend Dan's got some great specimens, which are the great grandchildren of my pair. He's still got a few available now. If you're watching this in December in 2025 in the UK and you want false water cobras, comment below and I'll put you in touch with Dan, who's got some stunning true hypo, UK hypo, not pale face like this, true hypos. They look stunning. These snakes are so cheap to buy in the UK. Their value is tiny. They've never gone up in value since I bought mine. Look at that. They are, for a snake, intelligent, like false water cobras. They need, like indigo snakes, they require similar care, high metabolism, regular feeding, lots of poo. They need plenty of food. They're incredibly tactile and far more than any dry marcon. They are much bolder from a way younger age. These things are incredible pet snakes. Arguably, as alluded to in another video, false water cobras are the best pet snake for grown-ups. They are truly stunning, but what they don't have, they just don't have the same kudos as the Eastern indigo snake. It is a legend in its own lifetime, and I've dreamed of having a much bigger, an 8-foot male Eastern indigo snake. I've got a 7.5-foot female false water cobra and a 6.5-foot male. But sad news from the snake room. Whilst I've been privy to keeping and breeding some incredibly beautiful and rare, especially colubrid snakes, it turns out I've completely failed when it comes to the legend that is the Eastern indigo snake.